Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Damage Report. I'm John Adrola. Very lucky to be joined today on the show by the host of Deep Dive and Rebel HQ contributor, Jordan Yule's here once again. Jordan Yule, how's it going?
John, what's up, man?
Everything, blood pressure, everything is up because everything is crazy and ridiculous. Like, that's one thing that dystopias didn't necessarily get us ready for, except for maybe Idiocracy, is how dumb every bad thing is gonna be. But I don't know. How you doing?
Okay.
Okay, good.
Doing all right, all things considered.
Yeah, I suppose all things considered. Well, look, everyone out there, thank you for being here and joining us today. We've got Jordan, and we've got a lot that we're gonna be talking about over the next 90 minutes. I do wanna give you a heads up that tomorrow, Anna Kasparian joins us on the Damage Report once again. How exciting is that? And we've already set aside a few little choice nuggets to discuss with her that we think she's gonna be really interested in. But for today, what are we gonna be talking about? Well, there's this insane evolution of this attempt to get planes into Ukraine. That's all blowing up in everyone's faces. A possible nuclear catastrophe happening. I know you're thinking, wait, are you talking about the news from last week? No. Fresh nuclear catastrophe that might be. This is a different one, actually. So we're gonna be talking about that. We've got the GOP going full on Handmaid's Tale. You are not ready for the sorts of things they're trying to outlaw in places they don't control. So we're gonna have that for you, and idiocy from Ted Cruz and Lauren Boebert. We're gonna dive into a little bit of right-wing grift on YouTube, the latest on Truth Social. There's a lot to talk about. So everyone buckle up, hold on to your butts, hit the like button, share the stream so that people know we're live, because algorithms are about as trustworthy as Ted Cruz. And with that said, Jordan, are you ready to do this thing?
I was born ready, John.
You were born ready. We should have had you on when you were an infant. But anyway, I wasn't ready at that point, so it's a good thing we waited. Anyway, with that said, let's do it.
Сьогодні, коли я йшов виступати перед британським парламентом, найстрашнішим числом було для мене 50. 50 вбитих українських дітей за 13 днів війни. А вже за годину стало 52. 52 дитинки. Ніколи не пробачимо це.
For those listening but not viewing, that was President Zelensky giving an update on the casualties in Ukraine. They are specifically focusing on the number of children that have already died, saying that the number has now gone up to 52 with additional deaths in the past few days. And obviously every life lost is a tragedy, child or otherwise. Specific to this, conflict or otherwise, we should always mourn these needless deaths, particularly of civilians. And so that is sort of the backdrop for the updates we're going to be giving you now, including breaking news having to do with the possibility of a failure of this nuclear containment at Chernobyl. Really fast, so Jordan, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in. Zelensky has been doing these appeals to basically to the world, trying to inspire them to take this more seriously. What do you make of his international media efforts so far? Do you think it's been effective?
Zelensky has certainly captured the world, that is no doubt. One of the more troubling aspects is how people have responded. And it ultimately boils down to how people engage with war and consume war. And I was talking to a friend, Spencer Ackerman, the other night, who spent time covering the Iraq invasion on the ground. And when you see it firsthand, you really get a sense of just how abhorrent war as a global force and like the worst aspects of humanity manifest in wartime. And it's something that sticks with you forever. So to convey that, I think he's doing a good job. But the way people consume it and have turned him into like a sex figure and like just the same type of behavior that they did with like Cuomo. It's like we need to like recognize that even in times of global crisis, like we have to identify the real human suffering that happens in moments like this. And it's because of how heavily propagandized people are about war. They sell this myth of war through video games, movies, TV shows, whatever, and it totally sanitizes it. And you have, like you just pointed out, innocent civilians being killed, and people are just kind of treating him like a daddy, and just like, can we just take a step back and talk about what's happening?
I agree, and that does bother me too. I do think that's not, thankfully, as big of a response. Like, there are definitely people doing that. I think you're right to point it out. The effect of all of this that I find more bothersome is like people going out and looking for, what's a Russian thing I can get rid of? Who, like, there was a Russian, I think like a violinist or something, that lost a position like that. They play the violin. They don't pilot helicopters. Like, you can still eat Russian food in America. The chef didn't invade Ukraine. So let's be clear. If you're old enough to remember what it was like to be an American as we were invading Iraq, probably didn't like the idea that you would be lumped in with George W. Bush. The Trump years, I did not support what Trump was doing. I don't want people to associate me with him in the same way some random Russian bakery owner is not necessarily a big backer of Vladimir Putin. So let's bear that in mind. Everything bounds of reason. We have to take seriously what is actually going on, which he does get into. And I want to let people know that there's a lot of developments that are potentially incredibly consequential. One that happened just since our last show is there had been this complicated plan where, in theory, the US was going to transfer F-16s to Poland. In response, Poland was going to transfer MiG-29s into Ukraine, which was already difficult because the F-16s we were going to give to Poland in this plan were already promised to Taiwan. That has now blown up, by the way, with Poland saying that they're just going to give us the MiGs and let us figure out how to get them into Ukraine. But of course, that was the whole problem in the first place. I mean, in theory, we could give F-16s, although to be fair, Ukrainian pilots are more familiar with these MiGs. That said, everybody is worried about what could potentially be interpreted as sparking a war. There's some things that seem fairly clear. There's a lot of other things that can be done that are apparently okay. That plan, if it had gone through, I guess wasn't a massive escalation, I suppose. Us transferring in, as we said earlier this week, thousands and thousands of anti-tank weapons. I guess as long as we don't shoot them, it's okay. We're in a very weird world in terms of what could potentially spark a full-on fight with Russia, Jordan.
Right, and there's a couple different elements here. So to go back to your first question, like Zelensky's emotional appeals are what's being used to justify some of these increased escalations and acts of aggression, right? Like if something were to happen to him, God forbid, or if Kyiv falls, that's going to be used as a springboard to justify either a no-fly zone or an increased military engagement from NATO allies and Western states, right? That's terrible, and that's why we need to kind of like compartmentalize his address and the way he's speaking to the media and actual consequences of something like a no-fly zone. And there's Philip Breedlove, who is a retired 4-star Air Force general, admitted in an NPR interview recently that a no-fly zone is essentially an act of war. His words, because it requires you to, protect a zone. I don't think a lot of people understand what it is specifically. And that even means bombing into enemy territory if there are, trucks or munitions or whatever attacking the planes that are enforcing a no-fly zone outside of it. So what you would essentially be doing is guaranteeing bombing of Russian land, which is only going to trigger a greater conflict. And that is horrific. And while it seems noble to support this in the United States, what people don't really realize and think about critically is that's not a war fought here. That is a war that's primarily going to be fought in Ukraine. And we're not going to feel the direct and devastating impacts. They will. So it's very easy for people here to say, oh, let's do it. And there's a ton of support, but it's going to make their lives even worse.
Yeah. Well, look, heads up to the director. We're gonna jump around a little bit because we're talking now about the no-fly zone. So let's jump ahead to the Manchin thing. There are not just regular people, although we'll get to them, who are continuing to push for this. Now, notably, Zelensky is pushing for a no-fly zone. Other members of Ukrainian parliament have been going on US media to push for it. Joe Manchin is actually trying to pressure Joe Biden to keep it as something potentially that we could do, a no-fly zone. And here is the issue. A lot of people, as Jordan alluded to, don't necessarily understand what that means. I don't know if they think it's like stern words or something. Here's the most horrifying thing, perhaps, that we will talk about on the show today. Jacques Henrich had this tweet 2 days ago. Some members of Congress are beginning to advocate for a non-kinetic no-fly zone, something to the effect of using electromagnetic pulse, sonar, and cyber to keep Russian jets on the ground so they can never take off. Unclear how much support this will end up getting, particularly when almost none of that is a thing. That's I don't know if somebody watched Battlestar Galactica recently and got some crazy ideas out of it. Theoretically, some sort of cyber attack maybe could hinder their bases. That would definitely be seen as an attack on Russia. There is no electromagnetic pulse outside of like literally GoldenEye era detonating a nuclear weapon in the high atmosphere to produce an electromagnetic pulse that would admittedly ground Russian jets and to destroy every electronic in a wide swath of Ukraine. There are people in Congress who are talking about absolute sci-fi madness, Jordan. And the issue is that many of their constituents already support this sort of thing. There was a poll, 74% of Americans said that we should have a no-fly zone. Now, I question how many of them have any idea what it is, but they might soon be being told about electromagnetic pulses and sonars and all that. Now, when you explain it, there's evidence that people don't necessarily support what would in the end literally be brinksmanship with Russia over the possible shooting down of their planes. In Britain, they actually explained in a poll what it would require, the actual shooting down of jets, and 39% to 28% said they don't support it over supporting it. So there's a big job on us. The country can have a debate about whether they want to have this, but if they're going to have that debate, Jordan, we should at least be clear about what it is and what technology actually exists.
Right, and that's never the case with the media in talking about war. They love to sell it because it boosts ratings, it makes them feel important and like their job has increased importance and severity. But once you explain what this entails, then all of a sudden you see this drastic reduce in support.
Yeah.
But Americans are subject to intense military propaganda. We like to police the world, and it's aided by Zelensky's emotional pleas for one. And I like, you kind of understand where he's coming from, because obviously he doesn't want to see his people killed, but that is not, unfortunately, it's just not the best approach. And think about this too, right? How its effectiveness. What you would do is just draw invisible lines and say, no, you can't fly here. You're gonna do that to the guy who just crossed an invisible line, a border with troops to invade another country, and you're gonna act like you think he's going to respect
Jordan,
this?
But was he told not to invade? Maybe it's about the warning.
It's so ludicrous.
It's again, people can have a difference of opinion on this and they can advocate for their position. I would ask, I think we should be able to demand honestly that, like Jordan is saying, we know what it is that we're discussing. That's all. Anyway,
the guy who's like killing innocent civilians, like this is something that would violate the Geneva Convention. It constitutes a war crime. There's no enforcement mechanism. There's nothing that can really stop him from doing it, but he doesn't care. So why would he respect a no-fly zone?
Exactly. Look, maybe some people think that a war with Russia would not necessarily be the worst thing. I think that they have less influence over the media than in past conflicts. Thankfully, people are a little bit more worried about Russia than they are about Iraq, Afghanistan, those sorts of things. But we do still have to be on guard for this. Now, heads up to the director, I'm gonna jump back to the second graphic in this block. I wanna reset for the breaking news on this. Incredibly scary news. The breaking news of the morning is that we are not yet apparently out of the threat of some sort of nuclear catastrophe. This is not about Russia threatening once again to attack Europe or the US with nuclear weapons. No, this is of the war potentially damaging a nuclear facility. In this case, Chernobyl. We thought that we had gotten past the fears over some sort of containment breach there after the fight multiple days ago. Well, apparently now the Ukrainian government is saying that the electricity has been cut off, the access, the power line to Chernobyl has been damaged. And that is a problem because, as they say, about 20,000 spent fuel assemblies are stored in the spent nuclear fuel storage facility 1. They need constant cooling, which is possible only if there's electricity. If it's not there, the pumps will not cool. As a result, the temperature in the holding pools will increase. After that, evaporation will occur, and that will lead to nuclear discharge. The wind can transfer the radioactive cloud to other regions of Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and Europe. Now, how much of an immediate threat is there of this happening? I don't know. As we've said from the very beginning of this, take with a massive grain of salt any claim being made by a government, including the Ukrainian government. However, the International Atomic Energy Agency says that it's no longer receiving data monitoring systems installed at the plant and other facilities, which could be an indication that the electricity is down. It could be an indication that those systems have been damaged or shut off by the Russians who now control Chernobyl. But in any event, Jordan, on top of all of the other issues that are going on right now, Chernobyl having some sort of containment breach is hardly what we need.
This is awful, and it again underscores just how devastating in so many different ways war is. And you never really see these types of things depicted in pro-military or pro-war propaganda, but this is the real consequence. This is potentially long-term health consequences for people who had nothing to do with this to begin with, who didn't want this, who don't support it. Even in Russia, like there are thousands of protesters routinely being arrested for speaking out against this. This is awful. But again, to go back to why a no-fly zone wouldn't work, this is another example. Attacking or tampering with a nuclear facility like this violates the Geneva Convention, and they just disregarded it. So it's like, this is who we're dealing with. So this is just another example of why they wouldn't, lend any, or they wouldn't obey any no-fly zone or any sort of diplomatic pressure from the West. That's not diplomatic, but this is who we're dealing with. It's repugnant.
Yeah. And look, it's easy to wish that all these situations were super simple in terms of who's a hero, who's a villain, what's the solution. If I propose a potential fix to this, I would like to know exactly what's going to happen and not have to worry about some sort of unforeseen escalation. But these are complicated situations, and what is being done there every day has consequences. This is a reminder of this. I don't know if in 24 hours we'll find out, no, it's okay. It's like the other threat to Chernobyl or to the other nuclear power plant, the biggest one in Europe. There were fears, but it turns out it's going to be okay. We feel an obligation to make sure that you know every step of the way what is happening, and we will of course be watching for this. Although I have a feeling if the containment is breached, you're probably going to find out pretty quickly. But anyway, we need to take this seriously, and we need to at all times have the most responsible, thoughtful experts in charge who are going to be making decisions based on rational, sane calculations of risk, rather than advancing some sort of insane international relations ideology or trying to benefit domestic weapons manufacturing, all of those sorts of things. This is a reminder, if the previous years have not been, that politics does matter and who is in charge matters perhaps even more. One last thing, Jordan, the House has finalized a bill to send aid to Ukraine. They have in fact doubled what was requested by the Biden administration. They will be sending 13.6 billion, or at least the House has approved the sending of 13.6 billion, which I'm sure is going to be very helpful, and I don't begrudge it. And this is not whataboutism. They can spend money when they want to, and they can do it relatively quickly. Don't ever forget it. That's all. Any thoughts, Jordan?
You said it. This is what we see it into anytime there's, a military conflict or a bank needs bailed out, anything that kind of, goes toward sort of macro geopolitical goals. They got the money, they have the time. It's a priority, but if it affects the working class, it would benefit the working class. All of a sudden, we need to worry about the deficit. We can't do that.
Yeah, 100%. Again, not whataboutism.
No, I think it's good.
I think it's good. I want it to go there. I would also like it to be deducted from the military budget this year, because it's literally advancing the same interests. But no, we never get to talk about that number. Those numbers don't go down. The line always goes up. That's how it works. Really fast, yes. I want to jump to. We're gonna jump into one last video because there's an interesting mix of points being here, and I very much want to get Jordan's response to this. So let's jump into this last video. This is the third one.
But now, because Putin invaded Ukraine, effectively encouraged by the Biden administration to do that, which is true, because that happened, we are going to send billions of dollars to the Saudi theocracy, and then to the Iranians, and then to Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And at the same time, we're going to embrace green energy, which means giving the government of China complete control over a power grid here in America. That's our plan. Are you confused by it? Don't be. It's a moral victory. Let us know when you get tired of winning.
I can only speak for myself, of course, but yes, I am confused by that, and not because Tucker doesn't make at least something in the neighborhood of a rational point. The Biden administration have responded to the rise in oil prices, which, by the way, in no small part, that pressure is being put on him by Tucker Carlson and Fox News. He is reaching out to the Saudis and the UAE and potentially Iran and already Venezuela. Those are true things that Tucker is saying. He's just also pretending like he doesn't support that when he has no issue with us engaging with those regimes whatsoever. And then Jordan, he also lumps in, oh, so it is bad that we're spending all this money on the international oil market to bring in the oil, but at the same time, we've given up on oil. And in fact, we're doing the Green New Deal, which means that China is gonna be our overlord. Just which is it? Like, honestly, are we buying too much oil? Are we turning our back on oil? This is how he works. He puts out a little bit of grain of something that we should have a problem with, even though he does not. And then the whole thing just gets totally muddled. What do you think?
It's nonsense. This is purely ludicrous, but it just breaks from their standard narrative. So they had to cover while also condemning this, because no matter what the Biden administration, no matter what the Democrats do, Tucker and the rest of Fox is going to attack it and criticize it. But because it didn't, fit neatly into a greener future box, it's like, oh, well, you shouldn't do this because I don't like these countries and you should hate these countries too. And also don't forget, there's also this looming threat of electric vehicles. But like, look, if it makes shareholders money, he ultimately doesn't care. He just has to pretend like he does on TV.
Yeah, can the electric vehicle manufacturers just hire some lobbyists? Honestly, like if that's the only way this is going to work, is they're going to bow down to whoever is spending the most money. Can it at least for once be an industry that's not the worst?
Well, there's huge tax credits though in Build Back Better.
There are, and there have been. Yes, exactly. They want to do more.
They won't pass it.
Exactly. But again, no, like he would pretend that this should be domestic, but no, we're talking about domestic manufacture of electric vehicles, domestic manufacturer of the necessary infrastructure for clean energy. No, but again, none of this actually means anything to them. But we've sort of cruised past, I think, the most important point there. Tucker Carlson in that video, don't mistake it, said Biden encouraged Putin to invade Ukraine. Huh? It seemed like he didn't want it to happen. And by the way, like if a random person, a random commentator, even a random pundit wanted to say, well, I've looked at the moves and the incentives that were set up by Biden, and I believe that he did not do enough to stop this, and in fact might have maneuvered Putin into a position where he needed to invade. Okay, fine, throw that out there. But not a pundit who himself was paving the way for it, saying like, for weeks in advance of the invasion, like, yeah, there might be an invasion, but honestly, if it happens, why are you so mad at Putin about it? Why would you side with Ukraine? I side with Russia. Not a big deal. Why does anyone care what happens? Dude, you were doing that. And then immediately the invasion happens, he turns around, it was Biden. He wanted this thing to happen. Isn't that amazing?
It's remarkable, but it just shows that like his audience doesn't really pay that close attention or care, and they'll just believe anything he says, which is so horrifying to think about, because nationwide you have all these people just being totally brainwashed by his show and other shows on Fox that they wouldn't put those 2 points together. They just, okay, this is what I believe now. Okay, like this is madness.
My fear. That's my fear.
Yeah.
Well, look, I will only speak for myself. I only absorb these people in small clips, thanks to the amazing ongoing work by people like Media Matters and others. But there are people who watch hours of this. Send them some damage report clips. Send them a link to a deep dive stream. Hold on to your butts, because it's about to get even crazier than it already was in this block. Nice. You know that the GOP is bonkers. You've seen the sort of legislation they've been passing over the past couple of years, including effectively turning every busybody in Texas and other states into bounty hunters looking for anyone exercising their constitutional rights. And you might have thought maybe that's as bad as it can get. I mean, that is a legal dystopia effectively. Nope, they can actually go further in a couple different ways, and we're gonna reveal those. First, here, you might have thought that states can only outlaw things that happen in that state. Not so, they're moving beyond that. In Missouri, a lawmaker is seeking to stop residents from obtaining abortions out of the state, literally outlawing abortions in states where abortions are legal. This is State Representative Mary Elizabeth Coleman. Her thing would allow private citizens to sue anyone who helps a Missouri resident obtain an abortion out of state using the novel legal strategy, which is what they call it. I hate that terminology. Behind the restrictive law in Texas that since September has banned abortions in that state after 6 weeks of pregnancy. She loves this legal move of hers. That's why she's been attaching it to as many different abortion-related bills as she can, all of which have made it through committee. So they are advancing. This measure would target anyone even tangentially involved in an abortion performed on a Missouri resident, including hotline staffers who make appointments, the marketing representatives who advertise out-of-state clinics, Illinois and Kansas-based doctors who handle the procedure. If it's not clear, they're not Missouri doctors. They would be suing doctors in other states where these procedures are 100% legal. Her amendment would also make it illegal to manufacture, transport, possess, or distribute abortion pills in Missouri. That's the sort of thing we've seen in Texas as well. So this is taking, Jordan, the insane everyone gets to be dog the bounty hunter thing of Texas, and now saying, no, you should be following people out of state to sue the pants off them, financially incentivizing their insane xenophobic culture war.
Yeah, this is horrifying, but I think people should just exhale a little bit because there's likely, even in this current Supreme Court, probably no chance that this even survives. Because this is, if this were to be passed, it's guaranteed to be challenged in court. So
that is true.
People should just, wait before they develop anxiety over it, which I get. This is a very troubling trend. And if this continues, if the court gets even further to the right, obviously definitely something to worry about. But right now, it's probably not, going to survive, because that is just like, you can't do that. Like it flies in the face of like the core concepts of federalism and how we see states' rights and the 10th Amendment. Like there's just like very obvious unconstitutional components to this.
Jor, are you saying that the norms will save us? Haven't.
I'm not in the prediction business, but I just think it's probably not going to survive.
I appreciate you trying to reassure us. Unfortunately, you are too late. I am already anxious and I will not exhale, okay? But no, okay, I hope that you're right. I hope that the Supreme Court would find this to be a line they won't cross. I hope that they'll find generally, like bringing people in as bounty hunters for all sorts of different things to be an even easier line that should not be crossed. And but I'll include stuff like the California experiments to do this around guns and everything. I want the government and the justice system to be involved in laws. I don't want every random person who's been driven by economic, the devastation of not only the last few years, but literally their entire lives, to desperately be looking for a way to make money and thinking, well, if I can get involved in people's lives and stop them from living their lives, I can make some money. I don't know though. We got a crazy Supreme Court. We will see. Maybe you'll end up being right. In any event, so far these sorts of bills have been effective. I will remind you that in Texas, by the way, the abortion ban that took place back in September, where you can only get it before 6 weeks, has been working. People have been going to neighboring states, but the numbers in Texas have been down. So I guess this is the natural evolution. That, okay, so we stopped them from doing it here, they're leaving, we're gonna stop them from doing it there as well. More on Idaho briefly. Take a look at this bill. So in addition to trying to make it so that if you aid anyone in exercising their reproductive rights outside of the state, what if you are a family member of someone who needs gender affirming care, a parent of a trans kid, something like that. They want to put you in prison for life for helping someone to get the care that they need. And importantly, as with the abortion story, that's whether you do it here or even if we jump ahead to Aaron's tweet. Let's jump ahead one more graphic. You'll see in this tweet, Aaron has highlighted a couple sections of this. It says, if you move out of the state for the purpose of helping someone get gender affirming care, they want to lock you up for life. This is not like a Matt Walsh monologue. This is a piece of legislation they're pushing for right now, Jordan. Is that not? And I understand, maybe I need to calm down a little bit. Maybe I'm too anxious. I mean, how could the Supreme Court ever allow this? That is one of the craziest things I've seen anyone even try to do, even if it never happens, try to do legally.
John, this is the exact type of behavior that they try to smear all left-wing politics with. And they, liken it to the USSR or Cuba or wherever, where if you are subject to these authoritarian dictators and you're not even allowed to leave to go live how you want. And then you look at this, you can't move. If you even move out of the state, they'll charge you with a felony. That is absurd. And they have become what they purportedly hate. And it just shows like there is this increasingly authoritarian inclination on the right that's becoming more and more prevalent because sadly, voters are rewarded because all they care about is owning the libs and making your life miserable, making the lives of marginalized people, the people on the front lines of society as miserable because it makes them feel better because they're ultimately feeling inadequate.
Yeah, you're right. And it's not like on our side, there isn't any of that. Like, considering how little power we have sometimes, well, actually, we're gonna be mocking some people later on the show. It does feel good. It is not a replacement for substantive structural change, the actual fixing of issues. They use it to get their base to not care about those things, to not actually believe that a better world is possible. We need to make sure that we don't fall into that same trap. If that doesn't worry you, we'll see if this is gonna get your blood pressure going, Jordan. Okay, in Idaho, they have decided that the recent Russian move to clamp down not only in independent media, but specifically people distributing anything that portrays the LGBTQ community in a positive light. That's coming here to the US as well. Idaho's House has now passed a bill similar to the quote unquote gay propaganda law that allows librarians, teachers, bookstore owners, and students to be prosecuted for disseminating anything that portrays LGBTQ people in a positive light or even broaches the subject. It would remove an exemption that already exists for places like libraries, schools, museums, colleges, and universities. The sorts of places where you're supposed to be able to learn things, at least up until recently. And so Representative Gayan de Mordaunt says, we are simply asking that those that are responsible for the materials in our libraries or in museums or the other places that are listed in this code are handled sensitively and responsibly. There needs to be more vigilance, period. When you combine this with the Stop Woke Act and the Don't Say Gay bill and the anti-CRT stuff, I'm really wondering what exactly is gonna be occupying bookshelves in libraries and things like that. Jordan, what do you think?
It's chilling. This whole coordinated effort to target and humiliate and antagonize and harass members of the LGBTQIA+ community across the country is just absolutely disgusting. I was at the Supreme Court in 2013 for the Windsor versus United States, the federal recognition of marriage case. My friends and I waited outside for days so we could get in to actually see the arguments. And then when the decision came down, and then the Obergefell decision came down, was at the court for all of those, and just the energy there was just unbelievable. And it's something I'll never forget. And I in those moments I thought wow, we're really moving ahead as a society. We're really finally moving past this. And if I went back in time and told myself like, oh, in a few years they're going to be banning books about banning the ability to even talk about these things in schools and in libraries, like I wouldn't believe you. I seriously thought that we were moving ahead collectively, because it became like a lightning rod issue. People like Republicans didn't want to touch it, but there's been such a shift in how people's partisan politics has informed their behavior. There's a study conducted in 2018 in the journal Advances in Political Psychology that looked at political behavior over the past 30 years. And what they found was, starting in the 90s, but really over the past several years, people are largely now motivated by hate for the other party. And that includes humiliating them, going after them, targeting them, harassing them, whatever. And that is just an effective political strategy now, which is truly disgusting.
Yeah. And I shared those thoughts. Hey, when like something like national legalization happens, maybe we're moving past this. But I don't know, maybe in a country where more and more people are getting progressive, those who are not get more and more desperate, and they need to use tactics like this to stay in power. And the thing is, it's not even like it's overwhelmingly popular on their side. Generally, polls of conservatives show that they're not as anti-abortion as their elected leaders. They're not as anti-trans as their elected leaders. They don't support these things, but they keep voting in people who do. And those who do in that group are giving huge amounts of money to the biggest whack jobs running on the right. In any event, we are going to go to our last break of the hour. Really important news to get to. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Okay, everybody, exciting legal news. Let's jump into this. The former leader of the Proud Boys was arrested just yesterday in Miami. And we have some footage of the actual arrest. It was not the most dignified thing, but take a look at this. Okay, so you can see Enrique Tarrio, a 38-year-old there. Could they have not have given him a little bit more note? I mean, maybe they were worried he would flee or something like that. But as much as I'm not a fan of anyone in the Proud Boys, I don't need a person to be dragged away in their underwear. I don't like it when it's not awful people. But anyway, you can see him there. He was arrested, indicted on one count of each of conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an official proceeding, as well as 2 counts each of assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers and destruction of government property in the Capitol breach. Now, notably, Enrique Tarrio was not actually there on the 6th. So he had been arrested in Washington 2 days before the insurrection, charged with vandalizing a Black Lives Matter banner at a historic black church. So, classy guy there. That was in December of 2020. So he had been arrested before the 6th. The day before the Capitol was attacked, a judge ordered him to stay out of Washington. He served a 5-month sentence in that case. But now there's new charges in relation to the planning and all of that. They claim that he led the advanced planning, remained in contact with other members of the Proud Boy during the actual breach. Also, it's alleged that he claimed credit for what happened on social media and in encrypted chat rooms before and during the attack. So while he was not himself there, he'd been sort of legally restricted from doing so, Jordan. Apparently, they're alleging he was still involved in what happened on the 6th.
I mean, yeah, he's obviously implicated in a lot of this. He's, the Proud Boys are a purely, evil force. But I want to echo some of the stuff I see in the chat, and I think what you pointed out. But also, it boils down to, the core of how we want to reform policing in this country. And look, as much as we hate this guy, I think doing that, just let him put on clothes. These types of perp walks are just designed to humiliate people and cast them negatively in the court of public opinion. Look, we already hate him. We're not going to like him, but come on. There's just basic treatment for people in the criminal justice system. It's something that we should do. And again, hate this guy, but let him put on clothes. Treat him like a normal person. Treat anyone like a normal person. Because when we push for reforms in the policing system, we push for better treatment of people who are, maybe on our side or we sympathize with. We're going to want those same treatments for them as well. So just demand it across the board. Be consistent in our ideals.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. We need to be consistent. They're not going to be. That should not stop us from being. For some people, the stereotypical like Twitter lib, like no, they're bad, so we get to be just as bad, if not more so. If not more so because we're right, so we get to be worse because we're right. No, we should be good people. We should live our values. If he did these things that he's alleged to do, he should be arrested. We don't need to make it worse than that. Really fast, so I did want to also let you know that the first January 6th defendant to stand trial for what happened on the 6th was found guilty of all charges. This is Guy Rafi, 5 counts faced for leading part of the mob that attacked on the 6th. His trial featured video he took with a camera mounted on his helmet and searing testimony from his own son who tipped the FBI to concerns about his father. And that is hardly unique. Many family members and friends were the ones that saw the social media posts and things like that and identified these people after they got out of Washington. So the legal cases over January 6th, I know it's a super slow process. Those are continuing and we are starting to see some legal consequences. Any thoughts, Jordan?
This certainly undercuts everyone's, on the right's argument that, wasn't that big of a deal? Why are there no XYZ? That moving goalpost that became, why are they not calling it a this? Why has nobody been charged with that? It's like, well, this is a slow process. It's like bureaucracy in the judicial system does not work overnight. So it's running its course. It's okay, but not surprising. I mean, I think a lot of people in the federal legal system are like out for blood. Because this was pretty heinous, and people died as a result. It was fueled by insane conspiracies. Like you're gonna see much more of this.
Yeah, and if he does end up, going to prison, at least this current president, for all the problems I have with him, isn't gonna pardon him. So that's something. Remember the stuff Trump was saying about the Proud Boys. Okay, well, we are running low on time. Here's what I'd like to do. I would like to jump ahead to the E block. So we're gonna skip the D block for now. We will come back to it. We can better use the time for the E block with what remains of this hour. So I'm gonna give the director a second for that. YTP Renewed says, to be fair, polls have been wrong before. I think referring to the US polls about a no-fly zone. I hope that you're right. I'm not surprised by the results though. Ferret Queen says, did you watch Midnight Mass? Just binged and loved. I did. Jordan, did you watch Midnight Mass?
What is that?
The Netflix show? Okay, so I'm assuming no. It's a good one. I like it actually. If you like horror stuff, it's not bad. It gets into like a lot of stuff about religion and everything. Anyway, I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, I rarely watch anything, so I'm like the worst person to ask about like any new show.
Well, and movies, I've noticed. But anyway, I'm glad that we can now bond over games. At some point, we'll talk about Elden Ring. We're gonna move on now to this video. Let's jump into this.
Work, not OPEC. And I don't know who's running the federal government these days, Joe Biden or Prince John Prince John, but they're taxing us into poverty. Look.
Okay, now it might be easy to see Representative Lauren Boebert there talking about Prince John from Prince John and wondering why is she so confused about that? Well, I think it's actually fairly understandable. She's confused about it because there's no Prince John. I don't know what it is that she's talking about. It is definitely a thing on the right that whenever they try to invoke the UK, they don't get it quite right. I will remind you of Trump's tweet about meeting the Prince of Wales, not Wales, Wales, like the big ones, which I love the idea that there would be princes of majestic animals, but that's not actually what exists. I could also be wrong, by the way. It is possible that Lauren Boebert, like with the QAnoners who think that JFK Jr. is gonna come back, or JFK himself, I don't even know, are gonna take over. Maybe she's referring to Prince John, 5th son of King George V, who died in 1919. Or they'd have you believe maybe he's gonna be coming back. But anyway, she's trying to criticize Biden, and we don't necessarily always elect the smartest, sharpest people. Jordan, I think she's doing the best that she can. What do you think?
I mean, that's generous.
I'm trying to be nice.
It is. I said that's generous. Like her And Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar and like these figures popping up in state legislatures around the country are embracing this fringe style of politics that really, like we talked about earlier, just play on people's animus toward the other, right? People who are outside of their political group and have had their brains like just totally fried by social media, by TV, by conspiracy theories. And that informs their talking points, their worldview, and ultimately their political stances. There's an element of partisanship in it, but like they are totally off their rockers. Saying she's doing her best is a very generous way of describing someone who is just ultimately out there to just be a contrarian, to trigger the libs. And you saw her behavior in the State of the Union. They're out for attention. That's it. And they, you can fundraise off of it. Like Wendy Rogers, I could plug a Rebel HQ video I have coming out either today or tomorrow on Wendy Rogers. She raised nearly $2.5 million last year, and that is the second most in all of Arizona politics, and more than gubernatorial candidates. Yes, Rebel HQ, tune in for more. But she did so on the backs of these like bizarre, hateful viewpoints and stances. It's sadly a viable political strategy that's being rewarded more and more by fringe voters and fringe political consumers in this country. Yeah,
wow. Wendy Rogers is like a legitimate crazy person, like arguably crazier than a Lauren Boebert. People in the chat are bringing up that she tweeted out photos of Prince John. Like not only is she referring to like Prince John from Robin Hood, but specifically the cartoon one. Yeah, I get that. You get to do your thing where you try to be a part of the joke or whatever. Okay, do that. But anyway, is there something to what she's saying? I think in her continued commentary, there's a little bit that I think she's not 100% wrong on. But first, she went on to say, look, gas prices are higher than Jerry Nadler's pants right now. And Jesus, and the federal government is making it worse with their 18 cents per gallon tax and additional regulations like the ethanol mandate that adds nearly 20 cents per gallon of gas. People are going to have to start calling JG Wentworth just to get a loan to fill up the tank. I don't get her references. I don't understand at all what the point of any of this is. The 18 cents per gallon. If your issue is that gas is $4.50, the 18 cents is hardly a massive portion of that. But national gas prices are really high. As of yesterday, they were 72 cents higher than they were 1 month previously. The issue is that while she is rightly pointing out that the gas prices are going up, she's opposing things like the banning of Russian fossil fuel imports, which according to the most recent polls, 79% of Americans support. 77% of Republicans support them. 72% of Republicans who say they will back Mr. Trump in 2024 support the ban. So that seems like a bit of a losing battle. She does point out though, Biden's troubles with, for instance, speaking to Middle Eastern leaders like in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, which there's been great reporting on by people like Ken Klippenstein. So we're gonna put up a couple of his headlines. You should definitely take a look at those. But Jordan, what do you think about this fight over the gas prices and what should be done?
If they are concerned about spending too much at the tank, why are you, or at the pump rather, why are you driving a giant truck? Why are you driving a giant SUV, which has become kind of core to the the prototypical Republican identity for years? Like the gas guzzlers was something that they embraced. Well, there's a risk associated with that. They mock people who drive hybrids or electric cars. It sounds like okay, you're getting what you wanted, but also Trump killed Obama's initiative to heighten fuel efficiency standards, and they cheered that on. Okay, you're getting what you wanted. Like you have a car that has fewer miles per gallon than what the Democrat alternative, but because you will never side with the Democrat, this is what you get. Congrats.
Yeah, no, it's the rolling coal thing, but as like an overall approach to politics. It's as you said before, it's about owning the libs, even if it owns yourself. Own the libs, even if it owns your pocketbook. I don't think it makes much sense, but they've got entire media infrastructure, and now effectively the same people who would be on Fox News are now Congress people effectively, and it's been very effective against them. In any event, that is the end of the first hour. Thank you everyone on our linear platforms for watching. If you're on Twitch or YouTube or the members app, we got way more to talk about, including Ted Cruz lying about hugs after this.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.